Okay, so it's Cat Stanley Space Demon coming at you again, and today I want to talk about the 5 times that Paul Stanley was jealous of his Kiss bandmate and co-founder Gene Simmons. So let's go back to the very beginning, 1974. Kiss has released their first album for Casablanca Records, and they were relatively unknown as a new young band. Their first album wasn't selling a lot of copies. They were still building a loyal following out on the road with their stage show, and they managed to land a spot on the Mike Douglas Show. Now, the Mike Douglas Show wasn't exactly Kiss's target audience, but I guess they figured that, hey, it's a national show and national exposure for the band in any way would be good. Of course, this was the days before internet and social media, so it had to be a pretty big coup to get the band on that show, even though it wasn't their target audience. They performed the song Firehouse. As part of their appearance, Kiss manager Bill Aucoin approached the band to see which member wanted to be the one to go out and speak on the show's panel. And sort of by default, it ended up being Gene Simmons because Paul Stanley didn't feel that that was in his comfort zone. He figured if he went out there, he would just be out there. They would goof on him. It's a bunch of older housewives and homemakers. It's not the kind of audience he can win over. And he would just end up being the source of ridicule. So he declined the invitation. Gene Simmons went out there, did his thing, and years later, Paul would mention in his memoir that he thought Gene's appearance on that show was pretty goofy. He stuck out his tongue. He described himself as evil incarnate. Basically, he made the band look stupid, like they weren't serious. He really just came off poorly as a buffoon as far as Paul Stanley was concerned. But you know, Gene had the courage to go out there and be on the TV show as opposed to Paul, who flat out refused to go out. And I guess it's easier to criticize someone for being courageous than actually being courageous yourself. So I imagine deep down, Paul was really jealous of Gene because he had the courage to be on that TV show and he did not. Okay, so another instance, we're gonna go back even earlier than that. Before Kiss has recorded their first album, Gene Simmons hooks up with Paul Stanley. They're in the midst of putting the band together. Now, Paul Stanley has talked about how dysfunctional his home life was growing up. He had an older sister who had mental health issues, who really took a lot of the attention off of him. His parents were focused on her, and he was really dissatisfied with the amount of love and attention that he got from his parents. In fact, his upbringing was so dysfunctional, according to him, that it got so bad that he got to the point where he actually sought out psychotherapy. At 15 years old, he walked into a hospital to seek treatment for the issues he was facing due to this dysfunctional home life. And you know, this was way back before psychotherapy was mainstream. There was really a stigma attached to anyone who saw a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. So this was a big step, especially for a 15-year-old kid. And when Paul met Gene, he discovered that Gene had a really close relationship with his mother. In fact, Gene actually wrote songs about her. They were very close. She was very proud of her boy, Gene Simmons. And he used to talk about how he would go over there to Gene's house, and if he was in the bathroom, his mom would say things like, "The king is on the throne." And Paul couldn't believe it that they were so close when his parents couldn't give two you-know-whats about him. And here, Gene's mother thought he made masterpieces when he was taking a dump. And Gene and Paul really envied Gene for this, and he was really jealous for Gene's relationship with his mother when he couldn't get that kind of love and affection from his own parents. Okay, so another time, we'll go back to the 1980s. Gene appears in some movies. He has his own little film career. You might remember movies like Runaway with Tom Selleck and Kirstie Alley. And then who could forget Trick or Treat? Another one that he appeared in the 80s. And Paul was really jealous of this because Paul pointed out the fact in his memoir, Face the Music, that it was actually him who had started taking acting classes years before, and it was his intention to break into the movie business the right way, quote unquote, by going out on auditions and trying to land movie roles the right way, as opposed to Gene, who was using his connections in the music business to finagle his way into some movie roles. And Paul was really jealous and really resentful of this, and he felt that Gene during this time was an absentee member of KISS, and that a lot of the onus fell on him to keep the band going while Gene was having this acting career, and Paul was really jealous of Gene's acting career. Another thing Paul was really jealous of, magazine covers. The press attention given to Gene Simmons. Back in the 70s, Gene was usually the guy, when the press would come to KISS, the guy they wanted to put on the cover of the magazines, the guy they wanted to interview, and Paul really felt slighted by all this attention that Gene was getting from the press. You know, he even traced it back to that Mike Douglas show appearance, that kind of set the stage for Gene Simmons feeling like he was the spokesman for the band, and it kind of carried over into the press, where Gene got all this attention that Paul didn't get, and it really put a bee in his bonnet, and he was really jealous about this. He did not like it at all. Another thing Paul was really jealous of is Gene's reputation for being a savvy businessman. Now, a lot of people look at Gene Simmons, they think he's the mastermind behind a lot of the marketing and all the KISS products out there on the market. But Paul has made a point to point out that most of the time, when a licensee wants to put the KISS Light logo on their product, they come to the band, and KISS has actually got a product development team in charge of any products that are produced using the KISS logo, and that neither him nor Gene are the ones who have a significant role in any of the marketing deals. And that's something that Paul is really jealous of, that Gene somehow, through his endless self-promotion, was able to convince the public at large that he's this savvy businessman, even though in reality he is not. And Paul also likes to point out the fact that back in the 80s, when KISS was getting ripped off by their management team, it was him who discovered the fact that they were being ripped off after a trip to his therapist, where he presented some tax forms to his therapist. It was actually the therapist who told Paul that they were being ripped off and they owed the IRS a few $1,000,000. But Paul likes to take credit for the fact that he got them out of this sticky situation with this management team, and he was the one who got them out of this disastrous situation where they're being ripped off for millions of dollars. And when he approached Gene about it, Gene was in denial. Oh no, everything's fine. And Paul, it had to be Paul who convinced Gene, no, we're being ripped off. And in the end, Paul was the one who was the savvy business guy in that situation. And Paul has said that Gene's most successful business venture has been promoting the fact that he's a savvy businessman. So these are a few instances. Paul Stanley is jealous of Gene Simmons, and I wanted to share these with you today. What do you think? Is Paul just a jealous guy, like John Lennon used to say? Or is he just pointing out the facts? I hope you dug this video, and we'll see you next time.
Who's here?